I taught Bill how to use GarageBand during the pandemic because he was getting these, people wanting to record. And I don't know how I did it because I didn't really know how to use it. I was like, oh man, it's easy. Anybody could do it. I'm doing it off my phone. And I somehow managed to get him to learn how to overdub. And then when I tried to do it again, I couldn't do it. I had no idea.
Hi, this is Dave Douglas, and this is the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. That was Tim Berne, the voice and the music. We'll be talking to him today, saxophonist, composer, arrived in New York in the mid-'70s, studied and got to know Julius Hemphill, and out of that, started his own label among many, many, many other recording situations over the years. We talk about his long relationships with David Torn, Steve Byram, Hank Roberts. We also talk about his project with Aurora Nealon and lots of other super interesting musical topics. Tim is amazing. Please consider joining us as a subscriber at greenleafmusic.com. You get the entire catalog, not only of the podcast, but also all of the music that we do. And we would really appreciate it. We count on your support. So come on over and say hello. And here is the conversation with Tim Berne.
I'm serious. I have no idea how I did it. And
But Bill is doing it.
Bill is doing it. And Bill, no offense, Bill, but way less technological than I am. And, we're the last two people writing music by hand, probably, except maybe Ducray. But it was hilarious. And I said, Bill, you got to teach me how to do it. And he's like, oh, it's really easy. And I'm like, I don't understand, Then I just said, fuck it. I'm not really into that kind of overdubbing recording from home. I like being in the room and just farting around, and I like the pressure. There's something about it that.
And you told me you've been playing a lot locally. There's a joint.
I play at least once a week, and I've never done that.
What's the name of the place?
It's called Lowlands.
It's in, what is that, Prospect Heights? Gowanus.
We live in Gowanus now. I'm on 13th and 4th. And it's right around the corner. It's a half a block. If I forget something, I can go home and get it, like the music, or read, so it really is like, I think it's even better than Paul's scene. He had to take a cab.
Paul Motion, who stopped playing outside of Manhattan.
I used to think I didn't understand that, especially not going to Europe. I was like, oh man, I'm always going to tour. Now I'm thrilled not to be going to Europe and just doing shit in the States. I have to say, I don't miss the grind. And now that I can play steadily, that's kind of the part I missed.
And you're writing a ton.
I'm writing when I need to. I did a lot during the pandemic, and I've gotten a lot of mileage out of it. And
what do you mean mileage?
Well, I wrote so much stuff, and so I've got enough stuff to play. Like 9 different things. And some of it I sort of changed. I changed quite a bit. I mean, I changed what I was doing quite a bit because I had time to. The first year, I was super productive, and I decided, since I didn't have any gigs, you know how sometimes if you have a lot of gigs, it's hard to focus on writing because you want to practice. And so since I didn't have any gigs and I knew I wasn't going to have any, I committed to writing every day. But I decided, instead of writing these contrapuntal weird ass things, I just wrote melodies, like spit out 1 million melodies. And then I figured some of them I could mess with later, but I ended up making a solo record. I ended up memorizing a bunch of these things, and I went upstairs on the 3rd floor and made a record on my iPhone. I just put it on whatever it's called, Memo, threw it on my bed and started playing, and I did about 3 a day, these little melodies that I'd written. And then I sent it to Torn. I said, what do you think? Can you make this sound good? And it sounded pretty good because the room sounded good. And then he mastered it and made it sound better. And then he did the same thing. He made a record at home, and then we started. And then this whole Bandcamp thing happened for me, where I just started to see the future, and I started putting out all these live things. I had all these DATs laying around, and cassettes, and I just started going through them, and at the same time writing quite a bit. And writing,
nice.
I sort of liberated myself from writing really complicated stuff, and so my goal was to write music that didn't need to be rehearsed, and sort of like, for me, kind of my version of jazz, just writing melodies. I mean, you know what I mean? Like everyone could just have the same material and react to it however they wanted to. We could start whenever we wanted to. And my only requirement was that everybody, memorize it, so that we're not, so I could just go into anything at any time. And, I met a young guitar player who was way into it, and we developed this whole book of stuff that's now expanding, and
that's what we were listening to on the way into the show.
Yeah,
his name's
correct.
Greg, if I'm pronouncing it right, Belial Chi.
Yep, exactly. And that was one of the first times we played duo, that record. We had been talking a bunch, and he had made a solo record of my music. I met him on Instagram. He was transcribing amazing. My stuff and playing to it, and it sounded really cool. So I texted him. I said, "Hey, you should make a solo record," and he did. And Torn helped him with the sound. He did it at home, and it was fucking great. It was really cool. And then I said we should do some duo stuff. And so we both learned the same body of material. And then we went up to Woodstock where David was, and this place, Applehead, you might know it. It's been up there for a while.
Wow. And you had David Torn come in and
Yeah,
engineer
David
it.
produced it. He produced it. Yeah, he was there, we did our thing. And the only thing I wanted to do, I asked Greg if he would play acoustic instead of electric.
Wow.
Because I thought that would sound really interesting. I'd never done that, and it was amazing. I mean, we did it, and plus, I'm not bragging here, but I'm shocked that I did it from memory because I was so afraid that I was going to choke, and I was like, so right before we started, I said, "Do you think we should have the music?" Greg said, "No, man," and I went, "Okay," and we did it, and we did it really fast, and it was, at the time. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I don't really listen to takes. And so we don't usually stop unless we're just tired.
Right. Yeah.
And so we just plowed through it. And then I just asked David, after every take, I kind of go, "Do we have one?" And he said, "Yep." And then, maybe one or two was like, "Why don't you do another one?"
Uh-huh.
But it just went really well.
To have somebody there that you can trust, that you can.
Yeah, I finally realized that as a control freak, obviously you resist, you don't trust anybody, but, and, some of the so-called producers I had, like SW, to be honest, I didn't really trust him.
I guess we let people figure out what SW stands for.
Yeah. I don't want to start trashing people, but, I just didn't trust him. And so I wouldn't listen. But with David, it's great because I know that he has my interest, he knows what I like, but he also has his own interesting ideas. And,
yeah,
if I really disagree, then it's no big deal. It's not like I'm fighting with the producer.
Well, also, he's got such a magic touch post-production, like taking what's there and adding another dimension that's his own, that's his personality and sound. So I don't know Greg. Where is he from?
So he's from a small town in Washington State, but he went to University of Washington. I think he got a master's there. He might have studied under Kung
Fu. Yeah, great.
He's pretty young. He's like 32, and it's wild how we met. It was these things were popping up on Instagram, and he would play unison with my solo record, and it was, it really sounded good. And his phrasing, he was really phrasing it. Right. And so I got in touch, and then we talked on the phone, and I was asking him about it. And, and he doesn't write anything down. I mean, he was just learning it. And there's a shit ton of notes on this record, and he pretty much learned every tune.
And the record's called Mars.
No, well, the one with him is the solo one. I can't remember what the solo one's called.
Oh, I see.
Anyway.
I see. Yeah.
Anyway, he learned, 60 minutes, he memorized the whole record.
Wow.
And then, and so I was impressed and I was looking for shit to do. So we kind of communicated. And since people weren't getting together, the solo record happened sort of remotely. Like I just sent him a ton of music and I said, "You can do whatever you want." And then every once in a while I'd say, "Yeah, I like this tune. Why don't you try this?" And I asked him to do it on acoustic guitar, and he was cool with that. And he had a couple of good mics, but he needed some help. And David,
sure,
they talked on the phone, and then they would talk every couple of days, and he'd do a couple of tunes a day and send them to me. And every once in a while he'd get stuck.
Wait, but the album that we were listening to, Mars, the tune
That's not the record I'm talking about.
Right. This was done in person, or was this also done remote?
Yeah, that was done in person.
Okay.
That was, yeah. And the solo one he did at home where he was living.
Right.
And we were just talking, and it was interesting. And he got stuck a couple times, and I just said, "Man, you just got to loosen up. Don't be so, something like, don't be so respectful of the written music, fuck it up." I mean, I'm not, sometimes it was just a melody without rhythms, and
right.
And I think he was, he was a little bit, I wouldn't say intimidated, but he was just trying to be respectful, and And even it's hard to
Well,
tell young folks not to be.
but it's also the whole remote thing. You know,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
trying to read the sign. Like
Hmm.
learning like in person is really different than
Exactly. Yeah.
playing
But it
with
was
somebody
great for
where
me. It kind of opened up.
good.
I'd done that with Matt, and then I ended up doing one. Cray did a record of my music, and it's become sort of a yeah, it's become a thing. That's anyway.
The music that you wrote for the duo album,
Hmm.
I mean, it's really interesting because I mean, it surprised me a little bit knowing your music as long as I have, which I guess isn't really that long, but you know, we go back a little ways.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. You know.
it's very melodic, but it's also you know, pretty composed, and that you're playing it with a lot of freedom and a lot of interpretation. And it made me wonder like how writing for that duo is different than the normal process of how you write for your band. And I am assuming that you're still doing everything handwritten.
I am, but he turns them into
He
computer
puts it
himself,
into a
and then he,
software.
but I mean, it's an interesting question. I think my in my head, I was trying to write these things like songs, treat them like songs, and so when we improvised, we talked a little bit about um, in this particular instance, not straying so far from the tunes, and most of them were unison. There's a couple of contrapuntal things, but a lot of it was unison. But I said you can play whatever you want. If you want to throw in some harmonies, if you want to change some notes, if you want to keep improvising when I start playing the melody, that's fine. We would start the tune. We didn't. Nothing was counted off. I didn't. Other than saying we're going to do this tune,
Right.
he didn't know whether I was going to start improvising or start playing the music. And so because we both had it, we really knew this stuff. And so I
Right.
didn't want to have a set kind of way of doing it. And as you can see, there's really almost no place where we're not playing together.
And
And the version,
what you said about it's like playing songs really comes across.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
obviously we're not going bar by bar, and some of them don't have
well,
bar.
yeah, I didn't mean
Yeah, I know, I
like
know.
playing a jazz standard, but
Yeah,
playing
but in a
songs in
way,
terms of, you know, there's a mood and a feeling and a main melody and a vibe to it that you guys
exactly,
pretty much stick
exactly.
to.
And I like the idea of us playing and reacting to the exact same material and not having these three parts, or you know what I mean, because sometimes
Yeah.
that's one of the things in most of my bands. You play this really complicated head, and then you get to the improv and you're like, what the fuck do I do now? Do I use the rhythmic ideas? Do I use the one of the seven melody? And so
Yeah.
with this, there was no, it wasn't necessary to come up with anything. We just paraphrase the melodies, kind of like the way Bill plays, and those are kind of my inspiration for that. Sonny Rollins or somebody, where you just paraphrase the melody all day long, and then every once in a while you go off, and then but you're hearing it in your head all the time. Like
Sure.
probably most musicians learn this like when they're 15. But I'm a little late to the game. But it's something I've always had in the back of my mind where I've always complained about not being able to write something simple. And
Huh.
so,
Wow.
and I love playing melodically. I mean, I think there's a
Yeah.
bit of a misunderstanding in that regard.
Funny to hear you say that because to me it seems like you always have.
Yeah, well,
So,
I think so. But anyway,
and I mean, we'll talk about influences later on,
yeah,
but you know, it's an interesting observation about it because
well,
I wouldn't have necessarily heard it that way. But also, when I first was confronted with having to learn your music and study it, you know, what you were writing at that time was really challenging, really
yeah,
hard, really extended written stuff. And I didn't use the computer then either, so I was reading it from the handwritten, and
It ain't pretty.
I can't really do it anymore. I don't know what that is.
Actually, I can't
Maybe I
read.
just got used to it.
I can't read computer music. I cannot read the bar sizes. I just can't do it, man.
Well, there's a certain skill to putting it on the page in a way that's, humane and friendly and communicative that not everyone does. But anyway, to completely change the subject, I want to play something from this record that you made with Aurora Nealon and Hank Roberts.
Oh, great.
And then talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So Aurora Nealon and Hank Roberts.
Yep.
And Aurora is a multi-instrumentalist, right?
Yes. On this, she's playing clarinet and accordion.
It's
she
accordion.
Plays soprano,
okay.
Alto, piano. I mean, she plays everything, and she's also an incredible singer.
Wow. And so this record, compared to what we were just talking about before, this seems like a completely different set of processes of putting it together.
You want to know what it is?
I guess there wasn't really a question. There wasn't really a question. So to be fair, yes, I do.
No, I can explain. It's a very simple explanation. Hank and I go back to the 70s, 1977. We have a very, unique chemistry. And no matter how long we haven't, it's been since we played, we just hook it up right away. And Aurora, someone I met, I'm going to say 4 years ago, 5 years ago. She lives in New Orleans. And I did some improv gig down there, a festival. Somebody invited me down, and I played with her for about 5 minutes, and it really felt good. We were just playing some weird shit. She was playing alto, and I didn't know anything about her. And then after the gig, my nephew lives down there, was there, and he comes up to me. He's never been that interested in what I do musically, and he comes up to me and goes, "Holy shit, you played with Aurora Nealand?" And I'm like, "Huh?" And I barely remembered her name, and I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, I can't fucking believe it. And it turns out she's like a legend down there, and she has about 20 bands, and has a band that she sounds just like Sidney Bechet on clarinet, soprano. She sings these songs in about 9 languages. She has a rock band that she does under another name. She can do anything basically. And then she's an incredible, free improviser. And so after that gig, I was kind of intrigued. And also she's a, really interesting person. And she was a fan, I found out, so I figured, well, I might explore this, and so we kept in touch, and we did a couple other things down there that weren't our projects, but we always kind of hooked up musically. And then I started getting her on gigs. I think I talked that guy Ashley at Big Ears into bringing her band to Big Ears. I sent him a recording, and he became a big fan. And we started doing gigs. A couple of years ago, we started doing gigs. She comes up to New York a lot. So we did a gig with Elias and Chess one time. We did a gig with Frizzell and this guy Tim Angulo, drummer. We've done stuff with Greg, and we just started doing more and more. And then last year, I decided to do a recording with her and Hank, just on the top of my head. I just sort of said, "Oh, this could be cool." And I found a place in Red Hook, this big room, gigantic room, this amazing loft. And I went over there. I met the guy, and I invited. He said, "Yeah, you can come over and check it out." I said, "Yeah, I'm interested in finding a space to record in. It's not a studio." So I went over there and I played a few notes, and it sounded great, really funky. And so I asked him if I could bring a remote recording guy here and record this little trio.
Wow.
He said, "Sure." Didn't charge us. We went over there. I set it up. It was mid-August. It was about 1,000 degrees out. No air conditioning, no windows. And we went in there with Joe Bransford, and we just improvised basically. We set up kind of the way we would on a gig. Aurora and I were acoustic, and Hank had a tiny bit of amp, and we just played for about an hour and a half, and then made this record. And I thought it was an experiment that maybe it might sound good in there. Maybe we'll get a record, maybe not. Small investment. Let's see what happens.
Joe really captured it.
Well, Joe got it. He did great. There was all kind of crazy noises and shit over there, but the chemistry was amazing right away with Hank and her, and
I like all those switching instruments and
it was great,
different
man.
sounds.
He's got a really wild clarinet sound. I mean, it's real old timey, and
Nice.
And she's just a great improviser. She's kind of like Bill and people like that, and Torn, where you don't ever really hear a style. You just hear sounds, and Hank too in a way, and so. Yeah, it was kind of cool, and we've been doing more and more gigs, and we're doing a States tour with this, and
Wow.
yeah, she's someone who really very exciting to have met her, and between her and Greg and even Bill, I hadn't played with Bill in 25 years, and now we've become really good friends. He lives in Brooklyn, and we've just done these really informal gigs in these bars, and
Great.
it's so much fun. There's just no pressure. It's not a band, and I don't feel like it has to be the next great thing. And
also, you're not always writing for those situations.
Yeah, exactly.
You have other situations where you are writing, but then so many of these situations, it seems like they come about through relationship.
Exactly.
more
And
than.
these tunes are very adaptable.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll just give everybody a melody and just say, I'm just going to start playing these, good luck. Or I'd write these 2 or 3 part things, but they're much simpler than the past.
And is that, another relationship is you and Matt Mitchell. Is that the way that you wrote the music on the record? One More, Please?
Yeah, a lot of that is from the solo stuff, I think, culled from some of the stuff I wrote
Oh,
that was just
interesting.
melodies. And so, with Matt, I just said, interpret them however you want. And I can do anything I want, whenever I want. He's there, he's got sonar. And then there's maybe one of the more complicated things, and then there are a couple, I don't know, there are a couple of 2-part things, but basically it's a completely different approach than what we usually do. Much more spontaneous, much more
You
improv.
mean different than what you and Matt usually have
Well,
done?
yeah, with Snake Oil, and also
Uh-huh.
we've made a bunch of duo records,
Yeah.
and it started out playing the hardest music ever written, and
Matt is
the most,
gifted that way.
yeah. And so we would play the hard shit that we all both wrote, but at the time I was doing a lot of that, and when I hear them back, I go, "There's no way I could do that now." But it was kind of cool to document that. And now we're doing, these things that are really different.
But it's
And
it's really interesting to me that that's what came out of all the craziness of the lockdown time
yeah,
for
yeah,
you was
yeah,
distilling, writing a lot, but then stepping away and letting the playing be a lot more tangential, let's say.
yeah. I think I didn't get tired of it, but I felt like I'd taken it with Snake Oil. I just took it as far as my brain could take it, and then it just becomes variations of the same thing. And so I thought, well, maybe I have one more move I can make that might be different. And I like sitting around playing melody. I just like, I studied with Julius. His 99.9% of what he did was melody,
Hmm.
and
Wow.
and he was one of those, the so-called avant-garde.
This
He
is
was,
Julius Hemphill you're
yeah,
talking about.
Julius. Sorry, Julius Hemphill.
Just
And
not
my
to be confused with Orange Julius.
so I mean, when I first heard him, it
Yeah.
was the first time I heard the connection between the funk and soul stuff that I liked, and then the so-called avant-garde stuff. And here it was in one thing. Dogon. It's like funky. It's melodic. This guy with this soulful sound, creating the intensity of these guys who were screaming and doing all this other shit.
Yeah.
And here it was with a guy playing notes. Melodies, notes, rhythms, and even though I didn't understand it as a musician, I thought, okay, if I was going to do music, this is what I want to be. This is how I would do it.
Wow.
And that's
Funny that this tune that you sent me, it's called Chicken Salad Blues, or is it Middle Seat Blues? But there is like exactly what you're talking about, vibe to it.
yeah. I mean, it's
And you
not.
guys are stretching, but
Yeah.
there's a very melodic
Well,
and
Matt's intro. I don't know if the one I sent you was with Matt,
yeah,
but he
it
plays his
is.
most. And I remember him saying, "Yeah, this is one thing I'm really uncomfortable.
Wow.
It's real straight ahead blues melody. It's this bluesy melody. It's almost corny." And he's like, he was terrified of playing this intro. Do you
Yeah.
go obvious? Do you? And he played this gorgeous
It's
intro.
great. It's great. Let me play a little bit of that. Yeah, Matt Mitchell, that's fantastic.
I think the best compliment I ever received ever from anybody was Swallow heard my solo version of Chicken Salad Blues, and he said, "Yeah, every time I hear you play, it reminds me of Lester Young."
Aw,
And I almost fucking died. I mean, it
aw,
was, Steve. I mean, he's such a fucking great guy, but he's also honest. So I mean, he would.
yeah,
It meant a lot. It wasn't one of these bullshit things like, "Hey, man, you sound great," and he's always, it's weird, he's always, of all the older musicians around, I always would bump into him and he was always listening to something I'd done, or just making these comments like, "Man, you write the longest melodies, with no rests." And anyway, I just really like him, but
right,
that tune reminds me of that.
yeah. Was noticing that a lot of these recent things, I guess they're on Intact, the
Yes.
label in Switzerland, but they also show up at your label, Screwgun,
At
on
times.
Bandcamp. Well, it
Yes.
seems like you're housing everything at at the Screwgun Bandcamp, but they're also, they're on Intact. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
I hate to
yeah.
use the
Some
word
of them,
officially, but
there's 6 records I think I've done for Intact. And I mean, I don't know how I was in a real, I left ECM, and then I think I was trying to get on Pi, and that just never seemed to get anywhere. I'm friends with Seth, but some reason it wasn't going to work.
well,
And
they have a lot of artists, so sometimes the pace can be a little slower
yeah,
than
yeah.
you
I mean,
might want to work.
it wouldn't have been right for me because the reason I left ECM, it was just too slow, and I'm getting old, so I didn't know what to do. I can't remember what. Oh, it
You're
was some
like
Snake
you're
Oil
you're
record.
like 28 now, right? You're going to be
Yeah,
30
exactly.
soon.
Rog 28. But I had this snake oil stuff in the can, and ECM didn't want to do it, and I was just about to do it myself, and I sent an email to the guy Patrick at Intact because I'd met him before, but I really assumed he wouldn't do it. He's got like a million records. He wouldn't have any money. Something would not work, and so I wrote him and I said, "Hey, I got this recording. I don't know if you want to hear it or if you're interested, blah, blah, blah." And I got an answer like the same day. "Yeah, I'd love to hear it." I don't think I even had to play it for him. And so I sold him that record. I think I'd already done it. And I sold him that. He put it out. And then I said, "Hey, I'm kind of a pain in the ass, but could Steve Byram do the cover?" And
Right,
he's like, "Yeah, great." And then, "Oh, by the way, can David Torn master it?" "Sure." So it was like, I mean, I couldn't believe my luck, right?
right.
It was kind of like when Stefan was good Stefan, you just, everything was like do it yourself and then have somebody else
Well,
deal.
I mean, you're close collaborators over many, many years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
So makes a lot
and
of
so
sense.
it was just like that. And I couldn't fucking believe my luck. I was like, holy shit. And with ECM, I had a pretty good setup because I had Torn produce the records. I even did the covers. I mean, he loved my photos, and it was about as good as it can get within that framework, but Intact. It's that, and then they actually tell you they like the music, which is a rare thing. I don't know why, but getting positive I don't know if it's positive reinforcement, but just getting any kind of positive response when you make a record from the label is sort of like the icing on the cake. And if they were any more positive, I'd be suspicious. I mean, because I'm sure they're not. I mean, it's like, okay,
But when you said a minute ago, you said put it out myself. By that you would mean Screw Gun,
yeah.
and I mean Screw Gun is still there, but are you just not putting things out that
I
way?
mean, when I have options, when I don't have options, Kevin Riley, he
Sure.
has a label called Relative Pitch.
Uh huh.
He'll put anything out for me, and we'll share the costs. And
So, but Screw Gun, I mean, it's got a pretty
but
big
then,
catalog.
yeah, Screw Gun, it's all digital. I can't.
Uh huh.
I could afford to put out physical stuff, but I don't. I just don't. Nobody fucking buys it.
So you
I finally
have
realized.
Screw Gun, the entire catalog up on Bandcamp as
I think everything is. Yeah.
digital releases.
I still have a lot of physical stuff sitting around from the
Yeah.
mid 2000s before I realized the bottom had fallen out of it. I mean, it's like you really want to do physical, and then you end up, yeah, you just can't. They're
Well,
really hard to
Intact
sell.
is doing physical for you, right?
They are, but they don't see. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't even ask what they sell. I probably, I get statements, but I'll say, how's the record doing? And it's not like, if I did that with ECM, they go, "Oh, we can't sell anything." They start moaning, and then somehow it's your fault, and then it just, it's a drag. You
You
feel
make it
bad.
sound like such a joy.
Yeah, and so with these guys, it's like, "Oh, we're so happy. It's doing so great. I listened to it yesterday. I love the music. The cover is amazing. Even the liner notes. I've been choosing musicians. Bakita wrote the notes for
Hmm.
this one.
Yeah.
Torn wrote notes. Branford Marsalis wrote notes, and they're like, "Oh, great! What a great idea!" Everything is like, and then on top of it, they just love the music and they're happy all the time. And they're not selling records. They can't be selling records. And I think it's never happened to me. I mean, like this, and yeah. I mean, I was so lucky. And then also they don't mind if I put shit out. I mean,
I
I
was going
can
to
put.
ask you. So
They don't care.
yeah.
No, never mention it. And just like if
So
if
just
there's
like at ECM, I'd imagine.
yeah. Although I pushed it pretty far. I bet I made more records in a 10-year period than anyone ever has. But it cost me my brain. I thought I was going to explode from the constant, battle of trying to. But I did do well for a minute. And but once Sarah stopped working there, it really didn't make any sense.
First of all, you're still doing well. Second of all,
I
you've been doing well for a long time.
don't know what I'm doing, man. I
Well,
mean,
and you had a label that you started before Screw Gun, long before
it's true, Empire.
Empire, from the late 70s, early 80s. And you ran that for a little while and put out your own stuff through them. And I guess it was probably LP vinyl, right?
Yeah, which I learned
Vinyl
from
back
you.
before it was ironic. And now it's people are buying it again. So there you
I
go.
guess, yeah. I mean, we did vinyl with the Ducray thing, but
Uh huh.
the jury's still out. I'm not convinced. I don't even think it sounds better, to be honest. I like listening to CDs.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't think we should dissect that part of
You
the
seem
business.
pretty
But
conned,
I'm
man.
just to talk about the music part of it. There's this box set. Is it 4 different recordings? 5, 6?
Five
The Empire
Empire.
box set.
Yeah,
Amazing. And so
old school.
this one, Spectres.
Yeah,
It's got Olu Dara on it, who sounds incredible. I don't think I've ever heard him play like that.
yeah. It's funny. That was a funny story. So I'd never done a multi-track recording. I didn't even know what that meant. I was doing everything was live to 2-track. I'd go out to LA and Nels Klein would produce it, and there was this guy who had a Revox, and we just play, no headphones. And that's what I thought. That's all I thought you did. So then I had this roommate in Brooklyn who worked for Channel 13, And he said, "I want to produce a record, you know." And so he thought he knew something about it, and we went in this terrible studio in Brooklyn, dead as shit, multi-track, and engineer didn't know who. I didn't know anything about any of this, right? So we make this horrible sounding multi-track thing, and then we mixed it, which I didn't understand. I was like, why would you record in a way that doesn't sound like what you want and then redo it?
And then fix it.
Yeah. So we did it. It sounded like shit. And then I sent it to, I think I sent it to Alex Klein, who was playing drums, and he said, in his usual blunt, he said, "This sounds like shit." So the one ace in the hole I had was I was using Master Disc with Bob Ludwig, master my records, and for some reason he loved me. The first record I did, he invited me in, we had lunch, and ever since then we've been friends, and he just loves me. So I sent him this thing, and I said, "Bob, we're fucked. I don't know what to do. Is there anything you can do in the mastering?" And he said, "Yeah, just give me, we won't do a session. I'll just take it and I'll do whatever I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can come in and we'll figure it out." So he did about, he told me, I remember he said, "Yeah, I think I made 97 moves or something."
Great.
And he made it sound better. And then I went in, and it sort of saved the thing for sure. And it sounds fine, but it was a shock to me because I was so used to everything just going there and playing, headphones. I didn't know what the fuck.
I had no idea that was the process.
But Lou was sick as a dog, man. He was sitting down and had this cold. And I remember after we did the record, he said to me, we were talking about Julius and all those guys, because I had met him, back in the day. He was playing with Julius and Threadgill, and everybody blew it. Oliver. He said to me, he said, "Yeah, man, I don't know why those cats are calling me, man. I hated that shit." He said, "I just want to sit around and sing the blues and play guitar." And I was like,
yeah.
It was hilarious, which is what he ended up doing.
Yeah, not really playing cornet anymore.
He made these country blues records, and
well, he sounds great here. So this is Grendel for Hamid Drake.
Yeah. I'd played with Hamid a little bit. Did you know he played with Art Blakey?
I did know that, but I've never heard. Is there a recording
I
of
think you have
Olu
to
playing?
dig, but you can find it. I think I've heard it.
Wow.
Really interesting guy. I mean, he's there's a documentary on his son where they interview him quite a bit. It's kind of interesting.
Naz,
Yeah.
the rapper, is the son of Olu Dara. He sounds great. Some of the names of the people, like James Harvey, trombonist.
Snake. That was his real name.
What's that?
His name was Snake. They call him Snake.
Oh,
I met him through Ed Schuler, but he's comes through that. Who's that guy from the Bay Area who plays saxophone, drums, piano? Had the hieroglyphics. Do you know that?
Peter Applebaum.
Yeah. So he came through that band, and I don't know if he's from there, the West Coast, but he played with those guys. And then Ed Schuler introduced me to him. Just said, "Yeah, you got this guy's a genius," blah blah blah. Really interesting guy. Never said a word the whole time. And turns out he basically gigs on piano. He's a really good piano player and a really good arranger and composer. And played with Don Cherry, I think, did a little bit with him and with Applebaum and those guys, and lives in Burlington, Vermont, one of those Vermont things. But
So
yeah, so Ed recommended him.
great. So that's 1981. Great. It's great that you were able to get it and put it out in a box with all that music. It's just
That was
awesome.
took some work. That
So this
box.
other one that you made for Julius Hemphill, who
Oh
you
yeah,
mentioned earlier, that you made, I think it's on JMT,
yeah. It was well, it's on Winter and Winter, I guess.
Winter and Winter. Right. Yeah. You mentioned Julius earlier, and I know he was a major influence for you. And then that you invited David Sanborn to play on it, who probably had a similar love of Julius's sound and his approach.
That was the idea. I mean, he had played with Julius in St. Louis. He knew, when we were rehearsing, he played some tune of Julius's by memory from the '70s that he knew, the Sing Kansas City line. I mean, David, he's not a bullshitter, and he was way into those guys, Oliver and Julius, and Philip Wilson kind of started his career, introduced him to Butterfield, um, and so Stefan, was at this point, Stefan Winter was getting money from these guys in Japan, Polydor, and so I had met David through Zorn, I think, or maybe from Hal Wilner. I don't know. I went on that TV show,
Right.
and we hit it off, and
Night music.
yeah, and we had a good time doing that. And he came over to my house and rehearsed, and oh, serious. I mean, we really had fun. And so I said to Stefan, he had some dumb idea. He said, "This is what he said. I don't really care if he hears this, but he goes, yeah. What is about how Stefan would talk? What is about a authentic funk record using Stevie Cropper?" And he named all these Memphis guys that he must have read off the back of an Otis Redding album. And I said, "What is about making a funk record with those guys and not me? Instead of being postmodern about it, why don't you just make a funk record if that's what you want to do? It will actually be good and make sense." So I said, "If you want me to do something for these guys, I would like to do a record of Julius's music with Sanborn." Talked about it, and I want to use, I use Hank and Joey and those guys. That's what I would do if it has to be something that's not. And Julius was still alive, it wasn't like.
Yeah.
And then I said, and we'll commission the music, so it won't be older tunes and blah blah blah. So he went for it, and the Japanese guys went for it. This guy Hiroshi, and me and Sanborn went up to meet Julius, and he loved, he was totally down. We had a really fun meeting, and we talked about the tunes, and one of the tunes he wanted to do, it was an older tune that he never recorded, was something he wrote for Fontella Bass, the singer, and the Rescue Me, Lester's former wife. Lester was her musical director when she was making all those hits. And anyway, so he wanted to do this tune, Mystery to Me, that she had sung, feature Sanborn, like a real ballad right up his alley. And so that sounded cool. And I talked to David, and the one thing I said, look, I don't really want to make a 2 alto thing. I'd get wiped out completely. And then also I just thought sonically it would just be kind of boring. So I said, would you mind playing sopranino as well, which he'd been playing? And I'll play baritone and we'll never play 2 altos. And he was like, sure. And so, and Julius wrote some pretty wild shit. And then we did a cover. We did Rights, this tune of his.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we did that Mystery to Me. And then we did these 5 new ones that he wrote.
Oh, that's great.
And then he let me fuck with them, so I added some things. Some of them were pretty sketchy. So I added, cello and guitar stuff just to make it a little more denser or whatever. And then I did an I'd added a written part to something. I don't know. Anyway, I added some shit. And then we did one tune of mine. And added Dresser and Herb to the mix. And that was, for me, that was one of my favorite records I did for Stefan, because I had no clue how that was going to end up. And I didn't want it to sound like, oh, hey, David Sanborn's playing weird, You know right. What I mean? I want it to be integrated. Like, this sounds like
sure.
a band.
Well, I remember it. I mean, that was when still lived Park Slope, I think. We were somewhat near each other when all that was happening. Yeah. And I remember.
It was 93.
Vibe, the whole thing, the way it came together and the writing that you were doing. And, Herb Robertson, I learned so much from him.
Yeah, it was a scary one for me because I remember when I got the music from Julius, I was like, wow, this is pretty sketchy. I'm not quite sure this is what I was expecting. And so on a couple of the pieces, I decided to add parts and then write intros and stuff. And I thought, oh, he's going to fucking kill me. And I talked to him and then I said, do you mind not coming to the session? Huh. I don't think he gave a shit, but I just said, I'm kind of nervous. I think I'll be too nervous with you there. Huh. And I'm doing some stuff that maybe he might kill me.
Right.
And he just laughed, and I just decided to go for it. And I remember this was one of the greatest moments ever. Was after I did it, I took a cassette up to his house. And Julius was notorious for not listening to music ever. You could see a stack of records in their shrink wrap from people, and I never would give him a record of mine or say, hey, check this out, because I knew he wouldn't listen to it and it didn't matter, and so. But I wanted him to hear what we did, and I was terrified. So we sat down, and played one tune, and he goes, interesting guitar player. Then long pause, and then, what else you got? Huh. And then I played another tune, and then you go, baritone. And then you go, what's next? And then, eventually we made it through the whole thing. And you could tell, Julius would never say, hey, man, that sounds great. He'd be like, yeah, and that would be like,
yeah,
as good as it gets.
Great.
And then we went out and had dinner and I was just flying, it was, I don't know. I really wanted it to be like the ultimate thing.
So, yeah. Wow. Such a thrill to know that he was happy with it,
Oh yeah. I would have died. I think I wouldn't have put it out,
Wow. So it's called Diminutive Mysteries. Yeah. And I guess it's probably still available digital. Oh, awesome. Okay.
That's our all.
People go hunt up Tim Berne and they'll find everything. Yeah. I'm going to play the track Serial Abstractions going out, but Thank you so much. And actually, I want to talk about Julius a little more and listen to a piece of his and hear what you have to say about it.
Totally.
So we'll do that for the extra. But thank you so much for making the time.
Man. Glad we did
It's great.
this.
And you didn't have to self-invite, and it was my oversight having
No,
waited
man,
this
look,
long.
man, I don't, I never do that to people. They never do it to me. It's like there's a lot of motherfuckers out there to talk
Well,
to.
I don't use that word often, but you're certainly one of the motherfuckers that's killing it out there. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
It's great to see you. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the conversation with Tim Berne. For all the other episodes of this podcast and all the music that we do, join us at greenleafmusic.com. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.